One of the things that I see happening throughout 2022 is going to be they're going to make these Tic Tacs. And these Tic Tacs come in many different shapes and sizes. They are sometimes cylinders, they are sometimes motherships, they are in all different types, shapes, and sizes. But what we're going to be seeing is these Tic Tacs, also called UAPs. That's the new terminology as well. We're going to be seeing them actually going and engaging civilian ships and vessels in a hostile, aggressive manner. They may not be killing people yet, but they will be doing things to disable ships, disable vessels, have real physical confrontation, because at this point they need to ratchet up the fear more than what it's been. It can't just be this, the Tic Tacs appeared and they zipped around and then they disappeared. They're going to need to kick that up a level.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome John Desouza, Special Agent John Desouza, to Exopolitics Today. He has had a distinguished career in the FBI. He was, for 25 years, working in counterterrorism and paranormal. He had a law degree. He acted as an attorney with the top secret security clearance, working for the US government, and also helped the FBI collect the famous X-Files. And so this was something that was used in the popular show, the X-Files. So I welcome John Desouza to Exopolitics Today.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It is great to be here with you on Exopolitics Today. It's good stuff, amazing stuff, very important, and something that I'm really excited to discuss with you. I kind of feel like you are the originator of exopolitics and the ideas behind what it means and what it is. And so it's just very exciting to be here with you. I'm really looking forward to your upcoming seminar on 2/26, the exopolitics paradigm shift is upon us. And I will be stealing that phrase from you. I think you'll be okay with that. It's great phrase. And I look forward to discussing that too.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot of work in these paranormal cases that the FBI has been looking at, and you had an interest in strange stuff, or what we call high strangeness, in the kind of UFO exopolitics field, and that was something I remember you telling me. I mean, we actually did spend a little bit of time together in China. We did a tour together, so that was great. You and I, Laura Eisenhower. And we got to talk about your background a little, and you shared how interested in paranormal cases, why the FBI. So can you kind of like explain how it is that you, as a young investigator just beginning your career, somehow got interested in these cases that many experienced FBI agents weren't interested in?
Yes, for your audience, I'm John Desouza. It's an FBI agent for over 25 years. I was also, many of my cases were used for the first season of a show that was back in the 90s called The X-Files. That was very interesting stuff. And my bosses at the FBI eventually called up the creator, Chris Carter, of The X-Files and told him to cut it out, to stop using real cases, and he basically agreed, and they were able to continue the X-Files. But the importance of the X-Files is that the X-Files actually opened up human consciousness to a lot of these things that are happening today, things that were unthought of, impossible to even consider back in the 90s, and yet here we are, and here we are going through them today. So that was really the super importance of the X-Files. And when I first got into the FBI, I got in because I was actually looking into what I considered a paranormal case that was going on back then. It was a couple of bank robbers that actually displayed superhuman abilities and killed and wounded a bunch of FBI agents, while themselves they were fatally shot. They were fatally shot by high caliber weapons, and yet they were able to both get up. And this was the case of the Miami shootout in 1985 that occurred with a couple of criminals named Maddox and Platt. And it was, at the time, it was a huge scandal because the whole country wanted to know how could these two hillbillies wipe out an entire squad of FBI agents and police officers while they were themselves fatally shot through many areas. And so when I first got to the FBI, I looked into that, and I was able to speak with a couple of sheriff's deputies that worked that case. And they were able to show me that they were sent to the apartments of these guys to try to find some kind of drugs. At the time, the popular drug for that sort of thing was something called PCP, angel dust. And so the FBI told everyone, oh, these guys were loaded. They were loaded to the gills with PCP angel dust. That's the only way they could have done what they did. And so that's what the preliminary thing was that they told everyone at the FBI headquarters. And of course, it turned out not to be true, because then their blood work came back and showed that they didn't even drink any beer before they performed these incredible acts. They actually just had a couple of cigarettes, nicotine, a little bit of nicotine in the blood. That's it, nothing else. But when I spoke to these deputies, they were able to tell me that the only thing they found out of the ordinary in their apartments was this altar, an altar to the Norse gods, where they would burn incense and sacrifice to different Norse spirits. So what I was able to determine at that point was that's how they did it. They did some kind of sacrifice and were able to get these berserker spirits to come and inhabit them and help them to do exactly what they did. And so I told the police I was working with, that's the answer. That's how it happened. Anyway, the FBI was not very happy, the brass, when they found out that I was looking into that, and they actually they tried to make sure I didn't graduate, but I still graduated from the FBI Academy because I was prepared for the things they were going to be doing. And I was able to graduate, but when I went to my first office, they said to the people at my first office, let's load this guy down with paranormal cases. He appears to like that sort of thing. So let's give him everything you can get and make sure he's real busy with that sort of thing. And they did. And so that's how I started working paranormal cases, and that's how it came up eventually. It was pretty crazy, but that's how it all started.
Amazing. So as a young FBI agent, you just were curious about how these guys displayed these supernatural abilities. Now, do you think it was just a matter of them channeling these Norse gods or being possessed by those spirits? Or do you think there might have been an element of like MK Ultra mind control involved in it? Or could they be like what we today would consider super soldiers that just, went off the rails?
Yeah, I think it was a channeling. It was the first couple of things that you said. It was a channeling or an indwelling or some kind of invitation to these spiritual entities, because they were not candidates for MK Ultra conditioning or super soldier programs, because they were just run-of-the-mill criminals. They had no kind of stability or extraordinary abilities that they displayed. I think people who are taken for MK Ultra programs and super soldier programs are people who have somehow distinguished themselves with some kind of abilities in the past, and they've been spotted by these people, these spotters for these programs, and put into the programs for that particular purpose. At least that's what I've always been told by people who have been victimized by the super soldier programs and by the MK Ultra programs as well. That's what I think.
So you are beginning your FBI career. You've been assigned a lot of these high strangeness, paranormal cases. So you start off with that first one during your graduation or during your graduating year. Then you begin working as a field agent, and you're given these paranormal cases. So, did any of those kind of like strike you as suggesting that there are things like secret space programs, extraterrestrial cover-ups going on at that time during your career?
Well, absolutely. One of the first cases that I was given as what we call a control case. It's cases that are supposedly not active, but they still have to be monitored and controlled by the FBI. And so one of the first things that was assigned to me was the control file for what I call the smoking gun document. And I wrote about it in my book, The Extra Dimensionals, and I actually put the document in here. The Japanese taught me how to do this. It's right here. It's a one-page document, and it is assigned to the FBI, and it has the serial number 6751, and it's called a Memorandum of Importance. It was written by an FBI agent who was undercover at the time, and he basically wrote that he has an alien informant who is telling him information about what the aliens are really up to, why they're here, what they're doing. And so he had, and this document, by the way, is dated July 8th, 1947. And it's kind of like as if Valiant Thor wrote a communication to us. That's kind of what it's like, except it's being written by the handler, the FBI handler of this informant that supposedly exists. But he does exist because this agent went to a lot of trouble to write this memorandum, and he wrote it to the scientific community. Apparently, in 1947, around the summer of 1947, there was an explosion of UFO activity all across the earth, everywhere, even before Roswell happened, which Roswell happened right around that time. And this was this huge explosion. So scientists were asking each other all over the world, does anybody have any information on this? What's causing this? What's happening? What's going on here? So he wrote this memorandum that went through FBI headquarters that was out to the scientific community. And this memorandum says in it, you may not believe what I'm about to tell you because you guys are scientists, but it's the truth, so I have to try to tell you. And he basically says, I have an informant that is super normal. That's an old-timey word for supernatural. And he says, and this informant is telling me that the aliens are here for peaceful purposes. They don't wish to have any conflict with us, but their ships have superhuman abilities that would completely annihilate our Air Force if they were challenged. So don't do that, he says. He also says the UFOs don't have anyone inside. The UFOs do not have anyone inside. They are, and he termed it remote controlled. They are somehow remote controlled. There is no one inside of them. He also said these ships are not made of metal. They're made of a kind of a sort of plasma, a shifting state of matter. And that's why they are able to assume different shapes, like shapeshifters. And he also says that both the UFOs and the aliens are here separately, but they come through the same dimensional portals. That's the fact of how that goes. And he says they come here from other dimensions of reality. He uses the Vedic language. He says from other lokas, which is just a word for dimensional reality, levels of reality that do not intersect, kind of laying on top of each other. And yet these UFOs, these alien visitors, are able to themselves intersect from level to level to level. And they use portals, apparently. So it's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. It's very interesting stuff. And it's, like I said, he describes that UFOs are not just metal, they're some sort of excarnate energy that is able to appear metallic at times. But finally, most importantly, he says that UFO alien visitors are not physical in the sense that we are. He says that they can apparently assume physical guise for short periods of time. Same with UFOs. Same with UFOs. He says the UFOs are not purely physical in our sense of how we think of physical. He says they can assume physical guise for short periods of time. So anyway, I see many of the things in this document were borne out in the years that followed shortly afterwards. For instance, the 1952 invasion of Washington, D.C., where we saw a full-on invasion of UFOs over the Capitol, over some of the most protected airspace in the United States. And we had for 2 weeks, for 14 days, we had, in 1952, we had so many of these UFOs come into our airspace. And it was the first and only time that in the Western world that an entire Air Force was sent out after UFOs. And it's never happened again. And the reason is because our Air Force was humiliated by those ships, by those UFOs. They proved to be enormously superior to our jets in every way. And they showed our jets that they could have destroyed them like that. They did over-unders. If you go read the Condon report, I believe it is, the general's report of that day, he basically told the truth of everything that happened because there were too many witnesses. There were just too many witnesses. He had to tell exactly what happened. And those UFOs did over-unders. They did loop-de-loops around our jets. They did forwards and backwards. They did incredible things that really show that they could have destroyed every one of those jets. And that's why never again has the entire Air Force been sent out after UFOs. So many of the details that are in this memorandum of importance, dated July 8th, 1947, many of these details have been borne out as substantiated by events that occurred in the years right after this memo was issued.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of memorandums in the FBI vault for those that are interested in Freedom of Information Act documents that describe instances where different FBI agents are giving reports, typically to J. Edgar Hoover or his subordinates, talking about what informants are telling them about UFOs, about crashes, about aliens, and so forth. So yes. Can you kind of like explain?
It's at, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's at vault.gov, vault.gov.fbi, or no, sorry, vault.fbi.gov. That's where it is. And there's actually, once you go there, there's subheadings that actually say paranormal cases, supernatural cases. And you can actually go to those tabs and open those up. It's fascinating stuff. I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. So I just wanted you to kind of like comment about how much credibility do we give to these kind of reports where an FBI agent interviews an informant and submits a report up the food chain to the director or so forth. I mean, are these reports that are kind of given minimal attention? Were they given a lot of attention? I mean, today, you know, they tend to be dismissed by the mainstream media and public officials, but you as an FBI agent having access to these things from 1985, you know, were these things that you took seriously? Were they part of the kind of investigatory toolkit you had to be able to understand what's going on?
Yeah, these types of reports are taken very seriously by agents on the ground, let's say, rank and file investigators in the field who have to deal with these things all the time. Now, whether FBI headquarters at the higher levels, whether they take them seriously is a different matter. They tend to try to bury these things and hope that they go away, because nobody wants to be investigating paranormal things and then be ridiculed be ridiculed in the law enforcement community. That was when we actually had a law enforcement community. We no longer have that. Now we have other stuff, but it's not law enforcement. So it's taken very seriously by people in the field who have to work with these communications. They have to use these communications to further their own investigations. So yeah, I think the stuff is taken as quite serious, as important as actionable intelligence. That's the term that we use when we know something has a sufficient indicia of reliability that we have to do something with it. We have to move forward with it for our other investigations that involve this sort of thing. It's like a lot of different people pursuing the same serial killer. When they come across the little signature moves of this particular serial killer, they have to put it together with other clues so that other investigators can work on the same case. That happens all the time, all the time. It's very, very important. What's different is sometimes when people read these communications, they believe that they say something different from what they actually say. So, for instance, for somebody who's not an investigator, can read the what we call the Hotel memorandum, and that's given a lot of significance. It's given a lot of significance as the FBI is here in a public document that you can find at vault.fbi.gov, is giving credence to the entire UFO phenomena. And it's very important because Hoddle was a very high up FBI official. And he was talking to J. Edgar Hoover in that memorandum. So people give a lot of significance to this. However, for someone who's experienced in government who reads that same memorandum called the Hoddle Memorandum, it's not that important to us because we see what it really is. It was just it was a plea to J. Edgar Hoover to get the FBI involved in the Roswell affair, in the Roswell crash, because if we don't, then if something good comes out of it, like let's say alien technology can be used for the United States Air Force, then the FBI will not get any credit for that. So basically the Hotel Memorandum was nothing more than reaching out and advising the director of the FBI that, hey, you have to get your agency in on this or else they're not going to get any credit if something good comes out of it. And the Air Force is going to get all the credit. You don't want that. And so he was just saying in the memorandum to J. Edgar Hoover, you don't want that to happen. You don't want the Air Force to get all the credit. You want to be involved. You want to get some of the credit. So let's get the FBI out there. Let's get them working. Let's get them moving on this. And it'll be a really good thing. That's what the Hotel memo really said.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so some of these memos were very revealing in terms of the relationship between the FBI and the Air Force. So I remember one of the memorandums. Now, I think this might have been a leaked Majestic document as opposed to a FOIA document that's released officially. So in this Majestic document, J. Edgar Hoover was actually complaining that the Air Force denied the FBI access, or was it the Army? I think it was one of them, the FBI, sorry,
they all used to do it.
It might have been the Army that denied the FBI access to one of these crashed discs. And Hoover was complaining, saying that the Army got the disc and took it away and didn't give us access. So he was kind of like complaining about that. So can you kind of like explain, what's going on here? Why would the Army deny the FBI access to crashed flying saucers in 1947?
Well, that's just regular jurisdictional politics. The Air Force knew that they had, and the Army knew that they had something very precious here. They didn't know what it was, but they knew it was something precious and important, as it turned out to be later. And so why would they give or share jurisdictional custody over these things with an agency that's just out for their own? I mean, for their own benefit. They're not, and they probably don't have the expertise, really, to really decipher a lot of this evidence and really know what it is. They would just have to defer back to the Air Force anyway for expertise. So what was the purpose of letting the FBI be a part of this? And so the FBI has encountered a lot of that over the years. If they're not truly needed in a situation, there's no reason to let them in. And that's always been the case. It's always occurred. And usually that kind of conflict goes right back to the president. And then the president has to settle it. And he has to say, no, FBI, you don't really need to be there. Air Force, you've got the ball on this, and just go ahead and run with it. That's the way it's been ever since.
Yeah. It seemed to be that the attitude of J. Edgar Hoover was that, well, the Army and the Air Force, they get us to do the kind of menial tasks of just interviewing witnesses, finding out what might be happening. But then when it comes to the actual substantive materials that need to be investigated and so forth, that they were denied access. So that's, I guess that's the jurisdictional issue, that the FBI didn't have the kind of expertise to really understand what was coming that had this kind of otherworldly component to it. Exactly.
And that's the way that it's always been. That's why when the FBI was in our new multi-jurisdictional phase back in the 90s and after that, the FBI tried to overcompensate by being super deferential to other agencies, and we've always tried to do that when it was a real organization that had integrity and so forth. So, but a lot of that's changed now, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we'll get into that. One of the things that one of the cases that really interested me happened in 1989, and that was the abduction of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Javier Perez de Cuellar, in New York City. And Bud Hopkins did a big report about it, and there was a book written that he wrote a book about that particular incident. And there were a number of witnesses describing this abduction that took place one evening in New York, and that the Secretary General was involved. And apparently there were a couple of agents that were involved as well. Now, it wasn't clear whether they were FBI agents or CIA agents, but did you know anything about that case from 1989?
I'm sure I've heard rumors about it here and there. I do know that Javier de Cuellar was not a greatly a paragon of strength, a tower of virtue of any kind. So I don't see him surviving that kind of an attempt on himself intact in any way. Was he the one that was kidnapped?
Yeah, he was apparently abducted by aliens, taken up in one of the craft, and essentially he reported that he was told that if the United Nations went ahead with the disclosure plan, apparently in 1989 there was a disclosure initiative that was actually being supported by a number of world leaders, that the aliens said that they didn't want that to happen. And so they threatened Perez de Cuellar and world leaders that if they went ahead with their plan, that the world leaders would be abducted and taken away. And that was something that Stephen Greer, actually, he talked to Prince Adam, I've forgotten his full name, Prince Hans Adam, who from Liechtenstein, who told him about the incident and that he was part of that incident. And he actually he told Greer that this was the threat that the extraterrestrials gave. They wanted to stop the disclosure initiatives going forward. And Greer kind of like objected to that, saying, no, that couldn't be the extraterrestrials. That had to be humans. And so, yeah,
that sounds like Greer, yes. Yeah. But Disclosure Project was shut down right after that, right? I bet.
Yeah, apparently, yeah, the idea of going public with extraterrestrial disclosure, because, in 1989, the Cold War was just over, the Berlin Wall had collapsed. So there was this wave of enthusiasm and optimism and the peace dividend and all of that. So people were very optimistic. And so the United Nations wanted to kind of like roll out the truth, but they were stopped.
I believe it all sounds extremely plausible and very authentic to me. And the actions that occurred right after seem to fit in with the narrative that this really happened, and that Cuellar, I'm sure, after he finished crying like a baby, the aliens probably pinned the message on his chest like a child and sent him back. And I'm sure they all got the message. I'm sure they all got the message, and that's why that was canceled. That sounds very plausible to me. And I'm sure that the agents that were involved were probably men in black that weren't from any agency. But they claim to be from every agency, as that's what their MO is. So yeah, that sounds like a very plausible story. And yeah, I do believe that there are aliens that definitely did that when that happened.
You know, you mentioned the Men in Black. I mean, there have been people that talked about it. I think Albert Bender back in the early 1960s, or actually I think it was the late 1950s, started talking about the Men in Black, and he was writing a book about it, and then he was threatened and stopped. So, you know, as during your career, did you ever come across any files, any reports that there was this mysterious group of men dressed in black going around intimidating UFO witnesses or abductees?
Several times I've come across that, and yeah, I have personal experience of that. And yes, the Men in Black always have the same MO, same appearance. They always show up. One of the places that they famously showed up was the hotel appearance. It may have been Ottawa in Canada, when the largest hotel in Canada had a giant mothership show up above it, and basically stayed there for about 3 hours. And many people got, I think it was like, what was it, like 2002 or something, like 2005, something along those lines. And I basically stayed up there for a long time. At times it was seen, other times it wasn't, because there was a lot of cloudiness. But it was this giant mothership that just showed up over the largest hotel in, I believe it was Ontario or Ottawa. I don't remember which. And it was, and many reporters got pictures of it. Pictures were very difficult because it was giving off so much light downward. It was right over the hotel swimming pool. So the hotel had a giant swimming pool. It was a very large hotel in downtown there in Canada, and it was there for like 3 hours, and then it just disappeared. And there are some good pictures. Of it. But basically, after that event was over, the FBI was sent to consult the RMCP and CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and we were there to help in any way that we could. And every witness that we spoke to, that we encountered, were like, you guys were here already. You guys were here. And then, of course, you look on the cameras and you see these men in black looking very intimidating and coming in to witnesses. And instead of interviewing them, they were kind of interrogating them and being very intimidating, and telling the witnesses that they must speak to no one else about this ever for any reason. And that was a huge debacle, because it involved so many different agencies that all were like, why are they telling us that the FBI was there already? Why is this going on? This is a different country, it's Canada. You're not even allowed to be talking to our citizens unless you're with us at the time. Like, what's going? And we had to tell them, no, it wasn't us. Look, here's the CCTV. Here's the men in these ill-fitting black suits. Which for some reason, I don't know why, they were on camera, and their black suits were sometimes too large, sometimes too small. It was very strange. Like, they're very strange the way that they would appear. Their appearance was always strange. and they would just intimidate witnesses. And that's just one instance. I mean, I've come across these men in black. What happens is there seems to be some kind of automatic alarm that goes out to them. If anyone comes across any bit of alien technology, anything that can be purported to be alien technology or based on alien tech of some sort, they somehow get some sort of automatic alarm. They know exactly where to come. They know exactly where it's hiding. Like if you take some alien tech and hide it somewhere, they know where it is. They don't even have to ask you. So we don't know what that connection is, but apparently it's there, and they get some kind of alert of some sort when these sort of things go on. And we still don't know. We don't know who they work for, but we know that. But I don't believe they work for human authorities at all. That's what I believe.
Very, very important point there. And now, one of the most interesting cases that I often kind of hear about in terms of people citing the FBI and these FOIA documents is the Nikola Tesla's papers in 1943 were essentially confiscated or examined by the FBI in terms of their national security value. And they actually got the uncle of President Trump to lead the investigation. Professor John Trump from MIT actually was asked by the FBI to look into Tesla's papers to see if there was anything in there of any great national security relevance. And so, what do you know about this FBI handling of Nikola Tesla's death, and there's stories that the FBI is sitting on a lot of Tesla's inventions since that time.
Yeah, well, first of all, John Trump was brought in as a contractor. He wouldn't have led an investigation because he's not an agent, but he was a physicist of some sort, and he had the major expertise in looking at these materials. So the FBI often hires contractors from outside who have expertise in the area that they're having to deal with, so that he would actually recognize what the Tesla papers were involving. And the FBI basically would have handed off all the material to him. They wouldn't have kept anything. They didn't even understand what they were looking at anyway. So why would they keep anything from Tesla? They would hand it all over to John Trump, give it to him basically, and just basically wash their hands of it and say, okay, you make the determinations as to what's important here and what's not. Then at that point, John Trump would have known that his major mandate from the powers that be at the time were ultimately you have to make these things disappear. That's all they really cared about. They just wanted Tesla technology not to be available to humanity. That's what the powers in charge wanted. So they would have allowed John Trump to have all the papers, have everything, take, and examine it at his leisure. And as long as he made it all disappear ultimately, which I believe he did, but I believe he kept a lot of it, and probably, which was perfectly fine for him to do, because as long as it didn't come back into public hands, that's all they cared about. And I believe that he did a lot more with those papers than anyone could ever guess, involving, who knows, free energy, time travel, and who knows what else. And I believe that's the sort of thing that he did with those papers.
Very interesting, the role of John Trump in all of this, because he was at MIT, and MIT was actually one of the places that helped with the investigation of the Roswell crash. And so you would think that John Trump, given his expertise, his knowledge of the Tesla papers, how high voltage electrostatics operate, principles of anti-gravity, that he would have actually been part of this MIT involvement in the investigation of the Roswell crash materials. So yeah, the Trump family definitely has a role in all of this. Is there anything you kind of know about the Trump family and their involvement in these?
I think that's definitely true. that John Trump was probably able to get even more relating to alien tech from the Roswell affair as well, because the FBI would have considered him very reliable. Also, the FBI actually wouldn't have cared that he actually kept all the papers and did whatever he wanted, as long as it disappeared. That's all the FBI cared about. The stuff disappeared. And so I think that John Trump did a lot of work with those papers and with Tesla's material. And that could actually explain the possibility of time travel with the Trumps, where we see these books from 1899 that were written about people named Baron Trump and also Don Trump as well. And these books are fascinating. I would recommend anybody take a look at them. You're going to have to put a lot of links at the bottom of this video, Michael, when you're done. You can tell Mrs. Whitecliffe to possibly to do that, take care of that for you.
Yes, yes. Well, one of the interesting FBI files that I came across was talking about Tesla, and it was examining a book by Margaret Storm, who said that she had information that Tesla was from Venus, and that Tesla himself believed he was dropped off as a baby from Venus. And there were other investigators like Arthur Matthews, author of the book Wall of Light, also talked about Tesla coming from Venus. So that, here's the FBI finding out, what does this woman know about Tesla and his relationship with the Venusians. Do you know anything about that?
I think it sounds plausible, because it would explain Tesla's extraordinary superhuman abilities that he appeared to have. And the only thing it doesn't explain is, why did he allow himself to be defeated by Thomas Edison and the powers that existed at the time, when he tried to bring free energy to the people of the world, of humanity. If he really was from Venus, then you would hope that he had some kind of extraterrestrial help for what he was trying to do. And so it's the only thing that's not explained is, why did he allow himself to be defeated by these great powers like Edison and his money cronies, who did not want to see free energy in the world, because it didn't help them to maintain their riches. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the only thing I can't see. If he really was from Venus, then why didn't he have experienced victory on these topics? That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
I think he was too much of a humanitarian. He believed in goodwill, and that's explained because, I mean, he would have been a multimillionaire. He could have been a billionaire, because he owned the patents, or he had got a percentage of all the patents on all the AC generators that were being built by the Westinghouse Corporation. But when the Westinghouse got into trouble because he was being leaned on by big banks and JP Morgan and his rivals, Tesla tore up the contract and he just said, no problem. And that turned out to be a big mistake, because Tesla then became dependent on people like JP Morgan for funding his projects, and that worked for a little while. But when it came to the crunch of like disseminating his technologies, he didn't have the funds to go it alone. He needed people like JP Morgan, and so it was, I think, it explains, if he's a Venusian and comes here with that kind of idealistic belief that, well, if you do good deeds, that will come and come back to support you. That doesn't work on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. In this density, what we're finding is that people must understand the existence of evil, even though it's so far away from what we are. It's so far away that people have a hard time even acknowledging that it exists. But if you don't, then all it does is it gives them the opportunity to have success on all the evil plans that they have. That's what we're facing right now.
Mm-hmm. So you started your career in the FBI in 1985, and you were there for 25 years. And around 2010 or so, I guess you retired. So what Why did you retire?
Oh, I had completed my 25 years, and it was from 1988 until 2013. And so I completed my 25 years, and at that time, we had a famous bad person who was being put in charge of the FBI. It was a bagman for the Clinton Foundation who was known as James Comey. He's a very terrible individual. Everyone throughout government knew exactly who he was. We used to call him the Cardinal because he would pretend to be a religious holy figure who was above reproach, but at the same time, he was working for Hillary and for Bill Clinton. He was working as a bagman for them to get rid of any investigations that were going on against them. And he did that throughout government for like 20 years. He did that. And so at that moment in 2013, I think it was around November or December, was when we were finding out that there was no way to avoid him being put in charge of the FBI by what's his name, Renegade, by the Renegade. He was putting him in charge. We couldn't avoid it. We tried, and nobody cared. And so at that moment in, I think it was November of 2013, is when he was put in charge of the FBI, and that's when I decided to leave. And actually, he found out who I was when he was coming in to being in charge of the FBI, and he actually tried to have me fired before I could even retire. I had like 60 days to retire, and he actually ordered his minions to come after me and try to get me fired based on something before I could retire. It was a really ugly story. I talk about it in the movie 1,000 Pieces, and I talked about that. So yeah, that's why I left, and I was very happy to leave at that time, and I was happy to be able to actually to retire, and I was able to defeat Comey's plans to have me fired in those last days when I left the FBI.
Can you maybe elaborate on what it was that you were doing at that time that Comey wanted to have you fired for?
Oh, it was because I was talking to higher ups who were actually talking to each other about trying to avoid having this borderline criminal put in charge of the FBI, because they knew it would come to no good. It would come to no good. They knew it would end up very badly for the FBI. However, the higher ups decided that they couldn't do anything, and Comey found out that I had been talking, that I personally had been talking about what a terrible person he was, and how everyone in government knew that he was working for the Clinton Foundation for like the last 15, 20 years. And that was basically all he did in government, was to put out fires for the Clinton Foundation. And so he found out about that, and it made him very upset. And so he made it one of his first orders of business to try to have me fired at that time. And so he had some cronies come, I call them the angels of death, come to where I was, and to go through all my investigations and try to find something, anything that they could pin on me as having been done wrong, so that they could use it to fire me. That was what they did. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I was able to get some help on that. I was able to get legal help and spiritual help. And I was able to defeat their plans to actually do that to me at that time. And like I said, I go into it in the movie 1,000 Pieces, which is a very excellent movie on Vimeo. That's what it is.
Thank you for that. So it's very topical because we've just had this John Durham submit a filing where he talks about the Clinton campaign's manufacturing of the Russia collusion narrative, that the Clinton campaign put this together. And of course, James Comey was the head of the FBI. So it's kind of vindication for what you were saying. And this is all coming out now. It's just the beginning. But what do you think is going to be happening over the next few months as Durham continues his investigation, and as more material comes out about how the Trump-Russia collusion was contrived by the Clinton campaign, and the FBI played a role in facilitating that to go forward.
I think that looks really positive. John Durham is a great investigator, and he's an independent counsel, I believe. So he should be doing some great things. The only thing I don't really see is our civilian Article 3 courts being able to handle these. Our court system has been so corrupted by outside influences. I don't see. I really could see Durham preparing these cases, getting them ready, but I think he has to somehow hand them off to Article 1 military courts to basically handle. That's the only way I see this happening, because under our civilian jury system, our civilian system has been proven to be corrupt over and over and over again. I mean, if you just look at what just happened with Ghislaine Maxwell, where that judge decided to find her guilty of something, and it's the first time in history that child traffickers have been convicted, but with no trafficking clients, no clients that have been named or charged at all, none. And also with a judge that then seals the records of who all the people are participating in this child trafficking. How could that happen? It's just it's hard to believe that kind of corruption is happening out in the open. And now, of course, that judge is being rewarded with a Court of Appeals appointment, the highest next except for the Supreme Court. That's the highest appointment for a judge possible. So the rampant corruption of our I believe it's Article 3 courts in the civilian world is just off the charts. It's like a banana republic at this point. So I don't see that our civilian court system is going to be able to handle these Durham cases that are being put together. I think it's possible he's preparing these cases, but he somehow is going to hand them off to Article 1 military courts. That's the way I think this is going. And it's hard to imagine, but I think that's the only choice that we have here.
That's very, very interesting. I wanted to raise an issue that came up in the mid 1990s, and I know it's something that you're interested in as well. There was this a Canadian researcher by the name of Serge Monast, and he began researching the idea that the governments, a number of governments, the US government, the Canadian government, were collaborating in putting together a fake alien invasion. And he began to put together this material, and he came out with a book. And not long afterwards, I mean, he was found dead, and a fellow investigator was also found dead. He had supposedly had a heart attack, even though he was relatively young, in his mid 40s. But it was very mysterious, and we know the church committee talked about the CIA having these kind of heart attack inducing technologies. So what is going down with this whole idea of fake alien invasions and the taking out of researchers, going back as far as the 1990s, that were putting out their data about this actually being something that was being planned by different governments, or the cabal, to put it more precisely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I believe that the cabal has this as one of the arrows in their quiver that they are reserving in case things go bad. As we see this this pandemic is falling apart. It's not working for them. All over the world, people are rejecting what's going on with the restriction of our freedoms, and that's been falling apart for them. they're going to have to change tactics. They're going to have to do something different if they hope to escape prosecution for their many crimes against humanity. They're going to have to do something else. And I think fake alien invasion is one of the main things they have ready. And here's one of the keys to understanding fake alien invasion is that our military, for instance, our military industrial complex is so large, so huge. It's larger than many countries that we know. It's actually, and so we have segments. It's not a monolithic thing. There's segments of the Pentagon that I refer to as the dark Pentagon. It is military officials that are working with the cabal. They're working pretty much openly with the cabal. And I believe that's the case in, but there's also white hat military, a section of the Pentagon that works with the white hats and works with them very closely. And also that's probably the case in other countries as well with large segments like China. China is not a monolith. China has sections that want to rebel against the CCP, against the PLA. They want to work for freedom, but then you have the dark sections as well. So that's the case in several countries as well. So that's what we're dealing with. And all the dark sections of those militaries are working together, and they are hoping to have fake alien invasion happening. And that's going to be one of their final cards to play in order to save the cabal from being exterminated. That's what they're hoping for. And so in 2022, as you're doing in your seminar, upcoming 2022 and beyond, one of the things that I see happening throughout 2022 is going to be they're going to make these Tic Tacs. And these Tic Tacs come in many different shapes and sizes. They are sometimes cylinders. They are sometimes motherships. They are in all different types, shapes, and sizes. But what we're going to be seeing is these Tic Tacs, also called UAPs. That's the new terminology as well. We're going to be seeing them actually going and engaging civilian ships and vessels in a hostile, aggressive manner. They may not be killing people yet, but they will be doing things to disable ships, disable vessels, have real physical confrontation, because at this point they need to ratchet up the fear more than what it's been. It can't just be this, the Tic Tacs appeared and they zipped around and then they disappeared. They're going to need to kick that up a level. And so we are going to see physical engagement where the Tic Tacs and the UAPs prove themselves vastly superior to whatever human vessels they're facing at this point. And we're going to see a lot of that throughout, because they really need to get the fear up to get back on the map with this fake alien invasion. And we're going to see a lot more politicians start supporting the Tic Tacs and the UAPs. And they're all going to be getting online to support them and to show how important they are. We saw that the governmental agency fizzled out that was supposed to be coming in the United States for the UAPs and for the Tic Tacs. That all fizzled out, and it's just because of timing. They basically just put a pin in this, but they're coming back to it later, and we're going to see a lot of it in 2022 as well.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting topics, is that this office for investigating UAPs, Congress actually passed the legislation in December of 2021 and giving the Pentagon and the Director of National Intelligence 6 months basically to set up this office. So you think the office that they're setting up is really just a cover for the cabal using that kind of dark military faction to stage a fake alien invasion?
Yeah, using super weapons. That's why when the to the Stars Academy and their fakers, when all those fakers came together and started saying about how this agency existed under what's his face, Elizondo, and all this stuff. None of that was true. None of that was true. It was revealed afterwards that nobody could find anything about this agency that supposedly this Elizondo character was active with and in charge of. It didn't exist. It wasn't real. But they're not going to stop trying, though. They're going to come back with more, and they're going to show evidence. Oh yeah, this agency exists, and here's the information about the agency. They're actually doing this and doing that, and they're going to show material, but it's going to be all cabal generated. It's all because they're generating this whole thing, and they're trying to make it so that they can capture the imagination of the American people, to make them very interested, fascinated, and scared. Make them very, very scared. That's the primary thing they're looking for as we move forward, and they may possibly have to use fake alien invasion. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, definitely it's something we need to keep in mind. So your book, The Extra Dimensionals, in the last 20 pages, you have a number of predictions, and one of these predictions really kind of intrigued me, where you talk about the release of some sort of mechanical AI life that will threaten humanity. And, you know, that's very interesting, given that this movie just came out, Moonfall. I saw it, and it talks about exactly that there's this mechanical AI life that has been hiding on the moon for a long time, kind of like, and then at a certain point, it becomes active, changes the moon's orbit, and you know, I don't want to do the kind of the spoiler thing and tell people what's going to happen.
Don't spoil it, Michael.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's very interesting that you talk about that. So, what made you come up with that prediction, and you know, involving the moon in particular?
You know, I'm not a scientist. I'm an investigator, and sometimes what happens is you start to accumulate clues, one on top of the other, and then you have to connect those clues. And sometimes those clues lead you to preposterous results as your conclusion, and yet you got to report it. You got to report it. When I was in my book, The Extra Dimensional, in the last 20 pages, I wrote up some conclusions, some predictions that I didn't know why I was writing them, except that that's where the clues led me. And one of them is, you know, we found out in the last like 10 years or so, we have found out that the moon is, for one thing, it's hollow. We know it's hollow. We found out through some incidents that occurred where something crashed into the moon, and it set off a ringing bell sort of sound that went on for an hour or longer, and was picked up by our instruments. So we know the moon is hollow. We know that there's no atmosphere. There's no atmosphere at all that could support biological life like us. And yet, we also know that there was some tremendous power, some conscious power on the moon that I think it was in 1972, said to all the nations in a very powerful voice, you guys better not come to the moon anymore. Don't try to land on the moon anymore. And you guys cancel your space programs right now, right now. And I believe it was 72, maybe it was 77, I'm not sure which. But in that year, the Soviet Union, the United States, and other major countries suddenly canceled all their space programs. And there was never an explanation for that. None. They said some things about budget cuts that made no sense at all. But there was never any sort of explanation. Even NASA, an organization that is formed specifically to spread disinformation, to create cover stories. That's their whole purpose. Even they were not able to come up with a good cover story. Why did we stop going to the moon for like 30 years or longer? It just made no sense. Well, that's another strong clue. Some sort of power on the moon advised all the nations, don't come here anymore. And it made it a credible threat somehow. I don't know how, but they made it a credible threat. And there's many other clues that come together with this, that I finally made the prediction that the moon would be opening up, and releasing some kind of mechanical life. Not life as we know it, but some sort of mechanical life that has consciousness, that can make decisions, that can make announcements to the people of Earth. And to this day, I really don't believe anyone's been back to the moon, even though we have China, we have India with this wonderful film of them landing rockets on the moon recently. I tend not to believe that any of that is true, because I believe that power is real, that power is on the moon, and that power is determined that we not go back to the moon. That's why we have so many people and so many things talking about going to Mars and landing on there when we haven't gone to the moon, basically. It's a very strange sort of anomaly, but it's more clues that you put together. And all of these clues finally led me to this conclusion that some sort of mechanical AI life will come out of the moon. It will open up, will come out, and it will threaten humanity in some way. And as we know, Hollywood works hand in glove with the cabal to create predictive programming. And whenever they have these sorts of plans, Hollywood will always release some kind of movie to implant this idea into the human consciousness, so that when it happens, it will be plausible. It'll be like, yeah, that could happen. That could happen. And that's one of Hollywood's jobs. And that's why I believe we see this movie, the movie Moonfall, that is occurring right now. I urge everyone to see it so that you'll have an idea what's to come, because I do believe it will come. And I'm going to see it this weekend, and I hope everyone else will. Very important to see and to be aware of these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's a fascinating movie, and it certainly fits your prediction there. One of the things that kind of like really intrigues me about what it is that we are going to be facing in the months ahead, in the years ahead, is exactly how this predictive programming is going to play out with getting people to buy into this kind of alien invasion. I know, back to this Canadian researcher, Serge Monast, from 1985, and I think his book was only published in French, not published into English, and it was called Project Bluebeam. And so he was talking about it back then, and he had data on it back then. But he said that at that time, the governments and the military that were planning this didn't have the technologies and didn't have the kind of public conditioning ready, that the public wasn't programmed. The predictive programming hasn't reached that level of sophistication for the public to be ready. But it sounds like now they are, and certainly we've seen. I mean, I'm a foreign national living in the United States, and I'm just amazed at how easily a large segment of the American population bought into this utter nonsense that somehow Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, and that the election was stolen by Russia using Trump as, it was just colluded. It was just fabricated out of thin air, but yet nearly half of the American population believed it. And so, that makes me think that, well, if they can pull that off, maybe they can pull off this Project Bluebeam, or this fake alien invasion.
Yeah, well, this, what you just said, exposes this point that I believe you will relate to immediately, which is that this what's going on now with Russia, it really shows that the leadership of the cabal that is trying to destroy humanity, that they really are reptilian. They have no creative imagination. They have to come back to the same methods and techniques over and over again. They can't invent something new. They just can't, because they are reptilian-minded overall. And so this thing with Russia, if people want to know the real purpose behind it, the reason the cabal is so intent, and they've been intent on Russia having a nuclear war against the United States since before Hillary was running. I mean, when Hillary the evil queen was running to be president of the United States, she was already saying, "Oh, we have to be at war with Russia. Absolutely, we will be at war with Russia. This is so important." And then they've been creating these scandals against between Russia and America ever since then, and it hasn't stopped. Right to today, they're creating, they're using their corporate media to put out all this nonsense. Oh, Russia's sending soldiers here. Russia is sending soldiers there. Oh, Russia is getting ready with some tanks over here. None of it is true. None of it is true. It's all just invented. And the reason is because the cabal knows that their two greatest enemies in the world right now are the United States under Donald Trump and Russia under Putin. They know that those are their two greatest enemies that are basically working together to destroy them right now. And the only other country that has sufficient power to really damage the United States is the nuclear arsenal of Russia. They're the only ones who have any kind of a nuclear arsenal that could actually compete in any way with America. I mean, truthfully, no one can compete with America's arsenal. They just can't. But at least the Russians could come close to creating sufficient damage to destroy America in some capacity. And then, of course, we could destroy Russia as well. And that's the cabal's wet dream. That is their ultimate fantasy, is to have the United States and Russia both destroy each other to a large extent. Because those are their two greatest enemies right there, gone in a single shot. That is why they are right now creating this nonsense with Croatia and Russia. That isn't happening. And they're making up stuff about Biden's clone is sending soldiers to here to respond, and he's sending jets to over here to respond. Biden's clone is not in charge of any of the military. He's not sending anyone anywhere. The only soldiers he has with him are the Hollywood soldiers that have those Hollywood soldier outfits on, as well as the fake Secret Service he has running around with him. That are, again, they're just Hollywood extras is what they are. So that's where we really are. That's what's really happening. And the average normie in this world right now, it's like Morpheus said to Neo. They're just living in a dream world if they're watching corporate news and believing anything that they're saying.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that this whole Russia, Ukraine, US conflict is going on, because I'm hearing from different sources that there is actually something in Ukraine, some ancient arcs, ancient spacecraft that both the Russians and the Americans want to get control of, and so that's at the heart of the conflict. And interestingly, Kerry Cassidy, I think you've been interviewed by Kerry, right?
Yeah,
she's just put out an article a week ago, I think, where she's talking about Russians and Americans are actually going into the Ukraine to fight against an extraterrestrial group that is appearing through some portals or stargates there. So, very interesting. So I think, like what's happening in Ukraine is, if you just stick with conventional geopolitics, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to bring in exopolitical. Right. And the exopolitical factor is that there is something happening in Ukraine that goes beyond the conventional, and that it either has to do with portals or it has to do with ancient arcs being activated and being found, and that everything we're seeing over Ukraine is just theater. It's just theater. That in fact the Russians and the Americans, at least the white hats, are cooperating to kind of like deal with whatever is going on there.
Yeah, now that I believe. See, that seems very plausible to me, because that would actually explain why suddenly the entire all cabal assets are so intent on the war with Russia, the nuclear war between Russia and America starting right now, because they're seeing Americans and Russians working together against this group of aliens in Ukraine. That I could see, because that would alarm them greatly, because then the Americans and the Russians could, working together, get their hands on some alien technology that, once again, would be to the great detriment of the cabal. And so that would actually explain why the sudden desperation to get this nuclear war going right away. And that actually is very plausible to me. And I definitely could see that happening for sure.
Yeah, well, one of the other points that you talk about in the extra dimensionals is you say that there's going to be a period when these extraterrestrial motherships begin arriving, and they're just going to appear over major cities, and people will be really fascinated and absorbed by this phenomenon. And so that's very interesting, because I'm getting from my sources that there are these ancient there's essentially a fleet of spacecraft belonging to a very highly evolved group of extraterrestrials has arrived recently in our solar system to watch what's happening with Earth and in our solar system, and that their arrival has triggered the awakening or the activation of all of these ancient arcs that have been buried here for thousands of years, that were left there by ancient civilizations and ancient ET groups that were visiting, and that these are activating, and soon they're going to start floating up and actually floating over cities. So that's very interesting. It's like, wow, that information matches what my sources are saying.
Oh, absolutely. And the major part of that operation is going to be silence. It's going to be silence. It's going to be just seeing these things there, but they're not going to respond. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to create wonderment, fascination, and dread. That is their purpose. And so that silence is going to go on for a long time. And that's why we need to educate each other now to be ready for that moment when it does come. And it will come soon. Also, I think there's going to be activation, in addition to the activations you were talking about, I think there's going to be activation of many of these portals that we see around the Earth. Sometimes the portals are in megalithic structures where you see these doorways that are carved into solid rock. And it's a doorway with no door and no way through. But that's because they're not activated. But once they do get activated, people will be able to use these platforms, and they may be like what we know as jump pads that can teleport people from one place to another, maybe in this solar system, a place that is ready to receive them. And so we're going to be seeing that too, and that should be really fascinating. Whichever way you cut it, we are at a period of tremendous transition, and we're going to this, as you said, this exopolitical paradigm shift that is going to be happening, and people need to be mentally prepared somewhat for this. They need to be mentally, so that they just don't lose it when these things occur and just go crazy. They need to have something to fall back on. And that thing is you, Michael. It's you and me and others who have talked about these topics and are here to tell them it's okay. Everything's fine. This was planned. This was something we knew was going to happen. There's no need to panic. There's no need, the cabal is so happy to always say, oh, no, we can't let humanity know these things. They'll go crazy. They'll go nuts. They'll pull their own heads off. Okay? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. They're gonna look at Michael Sala's writings, at his presentations, and they're gonna say, oh, it's okay. This was predicted. This was predicted to happen. And now we just need to know what's gonna happen next. That's all.
Yeah, well, this has been a fascinating discussion. I mean, it continues our tradition where you seem to always kind of like preempt me by talking about topics that I'm going to be covering in my presentation, because I'm going to be doing this webinar on February 26th and on the coming exopolitics paradigm. And here you are, your book, The Extra Dimensionals, kind of covers some of that material. So there you go, preempting me again.
At exopolitics.org, everybody get your tickets. Michael Sala, what's coming in 2022 and beyond? The exopolitics paradigm shift. It's happening, folks. Get ready. Be steady. Be steady. Calm. Hold it down. Hold it down. Learn what Michael has to say. Be there. I'm going to be there at that seminar. Please, folks, you got to be there at that seminar too. Very important. Very important for our future. We're in the transition right now.
Okay, well, in preparation for that, I recommend that people buy your book, The Extra Dimensionals, and read that, because that sounds like that's a real page turner. So where do people get The Extra Dimensionals, John, and where do they find out about other things that you've written or you plan to do?
Oh, just get The Extra Dimensionals at my website. You can. I'm told that people just Google my name, John Desouza, and they find all my stuff that way. But you can go directly to johntamabooks.com, and my books are available there. It's very important stuff. The predictions that I gave in the extraterrestrials, they're happening. They're happening now. And another one of the predictions is that entire towns will be abducted by aliens. Entire towns. And when I explain to you how that's happening, it's happening right now, guys. But these events are being covered up by natural weather and catastrophe phenomena, supposedly. But that's a whole nother topic. So people can get my books, of course, are available on Amazon as well. And also I will be appearing with Laura Eisenhower and David Rodriguez on Wednesday, March 2nd. They have a bunch of channels between the two of them. I'll be appearing on all of them, basically. And I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to Michael's seminar and to the stuff we'll be talking about and discussing, because it's coming up, guys. Teotwalki. Michael can explain to you what Teotwalki is. Very important. And we're coming up on it very soon.
Okay, well, I'll have to study up on Teotwalki. Find out what that is all about.
It stands for the end of the world as we know it.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Very good. Nice acronym.
It's not scary. It's a positive.
I guess you officials, positive. you love your acronyms, right?
I do. Oh, acronyms are everything. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, white hat militaries all over the world are cooperating to bring an end to cabal systems. So we have to be ready to assist in that, because it's going to be a war of all the peoples. And it's coming up. Up.
Well, thank you, John. You've been a fascinating guest, very informative, and I'm sure you've given people a lot to think about. So thank you, and all the best for your research. And I look forward to having you again back on Exopolitics Today.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's been awesome. Good stuff. Really great stuff. Awesome.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha.
Join Dr. Michael Salla, the world's leading authority on exopolitics, as he explains the significance of all these recent events and what they mean for 2022 and beyond, in an all-new upcoming webinar on February 26th. Register today on exopolitics.org.